All right, so thanks a lot for tuning in for this webinar. What we're going to do is we'll be talking about fear today because, as we all know, 4th of July is right around the corner. And this is usually the time of the year that everybody has a hard time with their dogs. So there's different things that you can do that we're going to go over, and things that you can do today to help your dog if they're fearful, and things that you can do long term with your dog, because obviously you're pressed for time right now as July 4th starts to approach, and depending on where you live, you may already have a lot of fireworks and stuff like that going off in your neighborhood. So we'll go through all these different steps, and then at the end I'll answer any questions that you may have. All right, so to get started, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with this guy, Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn's a pretty popular business philosopher, business guy that goes around, does seminars and all those types of things. Anyways, he says the only way to beat fear is to take massive action. And I completely 100% agree with this guy when it comes to helping your dog with fear. Because there's not just one thing that you can do to help your dog. You usually have to take a lot of different steps. So if you think you could just go out and get some kind of CBD supplement and give it to your dog and dog's gonna be fine around fireworks, probably not gonna happen. You have to take a lot of little different steps. And that's what this whole thing about, this whole webinar is about tonight, is to show you a lot of different things that you can do with your dogs to overcome this problem. Because the thing with fear is that it is such a distressing thing for the owner. You know, it's really hard when you're watching your dog just terrified and shaken, and you feel like you can't do anything for your dog. I see it all the time, and trying to communicate and help that dog can just be really tough. So as I said, there's not just one thing that you can do, and there's not just one thing that's probably going to help your dog. You're probably have to do a lot of different things. So just in case you don't know who Jim Rohn is, you probably know who this guy is, Tony Robbins, right? Well, Tony Robbins, he learned from this guy, Jim Rohn. And if you follow any of Tony Robbins' stuff, you could see the influence that Jim Rohn had on him, because he's always talking about taking massive action. And that's what you need to do when you have a fearful dog. A lot of massive action. Okay, so moving on. Here we come to understanding fear. And this is a big part of helping a fearful dog, is you really do need to understand how fear works and what you can do. And basically, there's two ways that you can help your dog. The first way is you can control the environment. This is what you do today if your dog has a fear problem. 4th of July is right around the corner. Fireworks may already be going off around your neighborhood. So doing some of the other things, helping the dog overcome the fear, takes a little bit of time. I'll show you all the steps that I use, but you can control the environment today. So we'll start with that, and then we'll get into how to overcome the fear, help your dog overcome the fear. So the first thing that you want to do is create a safe area in your house for your dog. There's some dogs that I've worked with, excuse me, this thing keeps dinging. Can you do anything about the dinging?
Probably people coming in.
Oh, okay, then that's what it is. Yeah, I got it. Excuse me. So create a safe area. So the first thing you do is find a place in your house, maybe a basement, maybe a walk-in closet, maybe you have a room that you can put your dog in. And then you'd want to set up a crate or a pen, something that you could put the dog into. And then you could do things like get noise canceling curtains. You could put music in the room to muffle out the sounds. And again, this is just something that you would do if you have a dog that's terrified and you really don't have time to do any training with the dog. But the safe area for your dog can really help today. And very easy to do. Noise canceling curtains, you can find them on Amazon. There's some really good ones. I've been into people's houses who they've put up those curtains, and it's done a lot to muffle the sounds on the outside of the house, along with the music. It can go a long way to help the dog out. Now, this is an interesting technique that you could do with your dog. First time I heard this, I was like, I don't know if this would really work. But there are noise canceling headsets for dogs. And you might be thinking, really? Am I going to put like this goofy thing on my dog's head? But in the military, dogs are being used all the time, right? A lot of Belgian Malinois, a lot of labs, different things like that. They're using these dogs all the time. And a lot of times these dogs are in combat situations. And so this dog goes into a combat situations and there's bullets being fired, there's bombs blowing up, there's loud machinery. So they train the dogs to wear these noise canceling headsets. And this one, I've done a little bit of research on some of these. This one is really interesting because it's easy to keep on your dog. Some of them are a little weird, but this one's easy to keep on. And this one also has Bluetooth. You can actually play like calming music in the background for your dog. But if you have a terrified dog and you got this headset on, there's a little bit of calming music in the background. That could just take care of the whole problem. Again, it doesn't. It's a solution that you can do right away. You still want to expose the dog to sounds and help them with their fear problems, but this is a great thing to do with your dog. And you can go check out all the videos that they have. The name of the website's pawnix.com, and they have a bunch of different videos, and they show you how to put it on the dog. They show you how to play music in the background and how easy it is to keep it on the dog's head. So this is a great option, especially if you have the type of dog that's completely terrified by the sound of thunder, lightning, anything like that. And you can see it's PAW. Okay, exercise. Always good dog. The only good dog's a tired dog. If you can, you want to make sure that you're exercising your dog before it starts to get dark. I live out here in the woods, and usually within about an hour, we're going to start hearing fireworks going off. So my dogs aren't nervous around fireworks, but if I did have a dog that was nervous around fireworks, I would make sure that I got their exercise done a long time ago. You don't want to, I know this seems very simple and very basic, but you don't, especially if you have a high energy dog, you don't want to be, oh, let's get a quick walk in around 6:30 and all of a sudden things start blowing off. So that's why you want to make sure that you get your dog out and exercise them early. Dog daycare, dog walkers, always good options, especially this time of the year if you have a busy lifestyle. Okay, now there are different dog calming remedies. This is one that I've heard a lot of good stuff about. This is from herbsmithinc.com, firework relief. I've known a few people that have used this. They said it worked really well. I've known some other people that used it and said, not so much. And again, if you think just getting this and it's going to fix the dog's problem, depending on the level of fear that your dog has, it may or may not work. Again, dogs with extreme fear, they'll probably just blow through something like this. But this, in a combination with a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, things that we've already talked about, can probably help the dog. What you're always trying to do is just do as many different things until you get the dog to that point where they're starting to deal with these loud noises or whatever it is that's they're fearful of. So you can check out any of these dog calming remedies, CBD oils and treats, and anti-anxiety treats have become really popular in the last couple of years. So you can check into those also. Thunder shirts and anxiety wraps. So these are pretty interesting. These have been around for a while, and I have seen thunder shirts and anxiety wraps do amazing things with certain dogs. I've seen dogs calm down just when you put a harness on them. You put the harness on them and they just kind of settle down. And I've seen dogs with thunder shirts and anxiety wraps, and they've just kind of, for whatever reason, helps them kind of just relax. And a pinch, I've done this with a t-shirt and an ace bandage. I've put a t-shirt on a dog, wrapped them up with an ace bandage, okay, when I didn't have one of these, and I've seen it help some dogs. So again, like we were saying with the massive action, getting the dog exercised early, maybe some noise canceling headphones, putting a thunder shirt on the dog, giving the dog some anti-anxiety treats or meds. And this can sometimes get you through these really tough times, especially like on 4th of July or anything like that. And again, every time something happens, you don't want to get a pill in the dog, wrap them up in a thunder shirt, get the headphones on, right? That's kind of a pain. But this is helping manage the situation as you do some of the training that we're going to talk about. And that's how I always explain training to everybody that I help, is that there's always two parts to it. There's the management part and there's the training part. And management is like when you get a new puppy, right? You have crates, baby gates, pens. You're constantly keeping an eye on the puppy because you have to manage like crazy because they don't understand, right? That they can't poop on your floor, that they can't eat your socks and chew on your molding. So you're in constant management mode, but nobody wants to stay in management mode, right? You don't want to have to like keep an eye on your puppy for 10 years. You want to get through management. I want to get through management as fast as possible. I want to get the crate out of my house, right? So I train my dogs as fast as I can. And it's funny how some people disagree with that. Training takes time. Yeah, sometimes, but for the most part, you can do a lot of stuff fast. And the reason I like to do training fast is because I don't like managing. I don't have to keep an eye on my dog constantly. And so that's what you have to think about. This part of the talk of this webinar is that we're talking a lot of management things that you can do. But the second part of this, we are going to be talking about how you can train the dog to overcome a lot of the fear. Okay, so moving on, of course, extreme cases, you're going to want to talk to your vet about maybe getting a prescription, And the thing is, I've seen a lot of dogs on a lot of these drugs, and they even blow through this, right? They, you give them Xanax or with some of the popular ones, Valium, right? You give the dog some of these, and I've seen, the dogs higher and higher dosages because they're so intense with that fear. But if you have a dog that is completely freaked out, you may want to do this. And again, who wants to constantly have to reach for a bottle and shove it down the dog to help them out every time there's a thunderstorm, right? Or a loud motorcycle goes by your house or something like that. So, but drugs are something that you can do, especially in extreme situations as the big holiday, 4th of July, Independence Day rolls around. Okay, so that's the management part. Those are the things that you can do short term right away to manage and help your dog. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about helping the dog overcome a lot of these issues that they have around fear. And before we really dig into it, I always like to have this discussion about fear because you really want to understand how fear works, okay? And fear is definitely an emotion. And so the advice that you get out there as a dog owner, it's always conflicting. Anything to do with dogs, right? People ask me all the time, should I get my dog spayed or neutered? Right? And I'm like, well, what'd your vet say? Well, they said, yeah. Well, my breeder said not till 2 years old. And someone else said I should wait until the dog's 6 months old. And there's always a lot of different information about dogs. How should you train your dog? Never use punishment. You should use punishment. Never do tug of war. You should do tug of war. And it's the same thing when it comes to fear, right? So you get a lot of advice around fear and emotions. And so what you'll hear is that some dog trainers say never give the dog any attention when the dog is afraid, right? Like you don't want to go over and hug him. And then there's other people that say, well, you can't reinforce an emotion. And so if you jump on the internet, what you find really quick, right here, you see you can't reinforce an emotion according to this guy, One Dog and a Man's fairly popular website. And this guy says you can't reinforce an emotion, okay? And then you move on to the most popular dog trainer in the world, Cesar Milan, the dog whisperer, who says Cesar's advice, giving him your dog hugs or special attention can actually reinforce his fearful behavior. Speak to him in a happy, playful voice to give him confidence. Never punish him for his fearful behavior. If you can, get your dog to play with you during a storm, all the better. So Cesar says, don't ever hug your dog and go crazy over the dog when they're nervous, fearful, or anything like that. This guy says, nah, that's a bunch of bunk. You can't reinforce an emotion. And then if you move on to, let's see, Dr. Patricia McConnell, who's a very popular dog trainer she wrote this book at the Other End of the Leash. She says it's almost impossible to reinforce fear. So you have three different opinions. You have one guy says you can't do it, and you have Cesar. Yeah, you can reinforce fear, and then she says, well, you can almost reinforce fear. So this is where the average dog owner goes, Who do I listen to? What do I do? So again, this is where it's kind of important to understand how reinforcement, emotions, and behaviors all work, because everybody seems to get confused about this. So, excuse me. There's like a background echo. Is there any way you can get rid of that? You know? Okay. Sorry. Okay. So, reinforcement, the action or process of reinforcing or strengthening. That's important to remember. Reinforcement or strengthening. Then you have emotion, natural, instinctive state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationship with others. So back to, what do you do if your dog's afraid or fearful? What's your response supposed to be to your dog? So you're sitting at home, Sparky's next to you, firework blows off, and all of a sudden Sparky's afraid. What's your first reaction? What's your first normal? You want to reach in, grab, and hug the dog. It's okay. It's okay, buddy. Don't be afraid. And the dog's like, oh my gosh. And it's just normal and natural for us as humans to want to reach in and try to reassure the dog, hey, everything's going to be okay. But out of the three, the one guy that I agree with, Cesar's 100% right. If your dog is afraid and fearful and showing signs of being nervous, you do not want to reach in and grab the dog and hug him and kiss him and tell him it's going to be okay. Because you are reinforcing the emotion, and you can absolutely reinforce emotions because emotions lead to behaviors. And you can definitely reinforce an emotion. It happens all the time. Happens all the time. If you think about it, all during the pandemic, right? What a just a rough year. And what I did during the pandemic was I watched a lot of comedy. Two of my favorites, Jerry Seinfeld. I love Eddie Murphy. And I watched a lot of their movies and Jerry Seinfeld's show. I watched it over and over and over. And I watched documentaries on comedy. I really tried to focus on the subject of comedy. And it's not that I want to be a comedian. I have no desire to ever be a comedian. But I did not want to watch the news because the news was so depressing day after day. I knew what was going on. I knew people were dying. I knew the numbers were getting worse. I knew everything was awful. I didn't need a constant reminder every single minute of how depressing things were. Everybody was walking around kind of depressed all the time. So to change my mood, I watched a lot of comedy, right? And if I was laughing and I saw something really funny, then yeah, it would increase my emotion, which led to a behavior, right? And overall, by doing that, I took more positive actions in my own business. It's very easy during the pandemic to say, you know what? Let's go see if I can collect some money, and I'm going to drink a lot of beer and just kind of like just ride it out. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to continue to improve my business, and that's exactly what I did. And I did it because I made sure I was getting the right information, right? I was getting the right reinforcement so that I would take positive action. And so when someone says you can't reinforce an emotion, I completely disagree. Say you're sitting in your house, you're all by yourself, it's very dark out, you look out the window and you see a clown standing there with a knife or an axe. Is that going to affect your mood, your emotion, right? It's going to intensify that emotion. And what's that emotion going to do? That emotion is going to lead to a behavior. Me, I'm going to get up and run. That's the behavior I'm going to do. And that's what dogs do when they're fearful. The other day when I sent out an email about a certain type of fear that I have. And this fear that I have is it's not that I'm afraid to take a shower. The fear is that I always have to look behind the shower curtain. It's just this weird, stupid, irrational fear that I developed when I was a little kid. And it's because of this movie. Now, I didn't see this movie until I was about 20 years old. Okay. I knew about this movie, but I never saw it until I was an adult. The person that saw this movie was my mother. My mom saw this movie and it completely freaked her out about taking a shower. When I was a kid, from the time I can remember as a little kid, nobody could leave the house if my mom was going to take a shower. Nope, take a shower, lock the doors, everybody stay home. You can't go anywhere. And she was always bringing up the shower scene about this movie. And so as a little kid, it affected me emotionally. And I would have issues, right? When I would go into the bathroom, I'd have to look behind the shower curtain. Is anybody there? Right? And this emotion was intensified, right? It wasn't taught to me, not intentionally, but it's just an experience that I had that led to fearful behavior. And so that's why you have to understand that emotions can definitely be intensified. They can be reinforced, and those emotions are going to lead to behaviors. And the thing you have to understand about fear is completely there's no logic behind fear. Once the dog is afraid, they're usually thinking one thing, and that's escape. I need to get out of here. And the dog's brain literally turns off. And same thing with us when we're really terrified, when we're afraid, our emotions kick in, and then it leads to behaviors. And we don't want to intensify the emotions that lead to the behaviors that make things difficult for us or the dog, right? And this is kind of funny because, again, anybody familiar with this and this? Can you hear that? Right? Let's say you're in the water and you hear this music, and then someone yells shark. What's your emotions going to do? Right? It's going to change your emotion. You're going to reinforce any kind of fear that person has. They could be in a pond and you hear that music and someone yells shark and you're in a pond, and you're still going to think, I got to get out of the water, right? I got to get out of the water, right? So that's the whole thing, is that emotions lead to behaviors. And you just hear that music, it can change your emotional state, right? Seeing this picture, right? Watching a comedian, seeing a scary movie, it can change your emotional state. So this is why it's important to understand that if you have a fearful dog, you do not want to enhance or reinforce those emotions in the dog that intensify the fear behavior. Because again, when the dog starts to get really, really scared, that's when they start to injure themselves. They try to escape, they run away, they get hit by cars, they'll smash through screens, they'll jump out. One dog I worked with jumped out the screen on the second floor of the house, jumped off the second floor, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So that's why it's important to understand how emotions and behavior do work. So the question is, well, if my dog's afraid, then what do I do? So this is where we start talking about helping the dog out. Obedience training. Now, obedience training is never, ever going to help the dog overcome fear, but it can help them learn how to deal with fear. And that's really what has to happen. So this is the advice that I give often when it comes to a dog that really panics. The first thing you gotta understand is dogs, you're in the house, dog hears something, starts to panic. First thing you got to understand is the dog's brain is shutting off. You got to get the dog's brain to turn back on. Okay. So how do you turn a dog's brain back on? So what I do and what I've recommended, and in fact, I just got an email from my friend Sue who said this worked perfectly. Took a little bit of time, but it worked perfectly for her and her dog. The first thing you got to do is you got to get the dog moving. Okay. Movement always gets the brain going. And if you think about it in humans, if you're ever stressed, nervous, you're having a tough day, one of the best things to do is to move, right? Get moving and just keep moving until your brain kind of starts working again, right? Until the stress or whatever it is just kind of bleeds away. So when I used to own a kennel, I used to get fearful dogs that would come in. The dog would be freaking out. I'd get him on leash and I would start moving him inside. I had a training area and I would just start walking him in circles. I'd walk him. And then I'd see if their brain turned back on. So how did I see if the dog's brain turned back on? I'd ask them to do something. I would say something simple like sit. And if the dog was sitting there like this, I can't sit. I'm about to die. I can't do it. I can't sit. Then I know the dog's brain was still turned off, and I'd start walking some more. And then I'd say sit. And if the dog sat, now the dog's brain started to turn on. Now I started giving them attention. Good. That's a good dog. Okay. And so that's something that you can do right away. Dog's nervous, get him moving. Even if it's in your kitchen, just going in circles, right? Just get him in circles. Just start him moving and then see if you can turn the dog's brain back on. The other thing that you have to understand when it comes to obedience training is that you have to understand how reinforcement works. Okay, so again, all over the internet, everything's positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement, positive, positive, positive. Here's the thing about dogs that are afraid. Positive reinforcement ain't gonna work ever. Someone says your dog's nervous around thunder, lightning, give him some treats. They don't know what they're talking about. I'm sorry, I'm gonna be very blunt about it, because when the dog is terrified, the last thing they're thinking about is eating. Same thing with you, right? Same thing with you. If you're in the shower or anywhere around this, right? You feel like having a steak dinner, right? Or watching this movie. Times I watch that, I didn't even want to eat popcorn. So the thing is that when it comes to a dog that's terrified, treats ain't gonna do you a damn bit of good. Right? Let me give you an example. Work with my dog training school is kind of unique. It's on the second floor, so you got to go upstairs to get there. And it's funny because I get people all the time, "Oh, my dog doesn't do stairs." Oh, that's all right. I'll show him how to do stairs. Don't worry about that. Just come on in. I'll show him how to do stairs. No, my dog won't do stairs. I don't care what you do. You can give him treats. You can give him praise. You can give him toys. Dog won't go up the stairs. I've tried it all. I'm like, you've only tried positive reinforcement. If you want the dog to go up the stairs, you have to apply pressure. You have to apply what's called negative reinforcement. Okay. Negative reinforcement. Don't get hung up on the word negative. Okay. Negative reinforcement just means we got to put a little pressure on the dog until the dog complies. This is very important for dogs that are fearful. Think of it this way. Negative reinforcement is the reason you wear a seatbelt today. Okay. Some of you guys that have been through my classes know this story, but negative reinforcement is why we all wear seatbelts. Everybody says, if I ask all of you right now, why do you wear a seatbelt? You're going to say, oh, it's for safety. Nope. You're going to say it's all because I don't want to get a ticket. Nope. The reason you wear a seatbelt is because of negative reinforcement. Back in the 90s, they put this feature in the car. The feature goes like this: ding, 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 ding. And it doesn't stop until you do the behavior. That's an example of negative reinforcement. That's what you need to do with a fearful dog. You need to know how to apply negative reinforcement. So a dog comes up, says, I'm not going up the stairs. I'm not going to go up the stairs because the stairs are going to kill me. I'm terrified of stairs. Got to get dog to go upstairs, right? Have to. Can't just 95-pound lab hoist them up the stairs every time you need them to go upstairs. So you put pressure on the dog. You put pressure on them. Once the dog starts to comply to the pressure, you release the pressure. Just like the car puts pressure on you, audible pressure. Once you comply, the pressure goes away. And it's the same thing that you have to do with a scared dog. Because when you're dealing with a scared dog, whatever it is that's terrifying the dog, you need to sometimes pressure them through the situation. Now, we can get into thresholds, right? There's all kinds of stuff that you hear about thresholds, which is very important. But thresholds basically where the dog just loses its mind. So there's people that are terrified of snakes, right? They see a snake 50 feet away. They're like this, right? They're terrified. Oh my gosh, the snake, I hate snakes. I don't know, they scare me. And then you put the snake 5 feet away. Now they're starting to go over threshold. You put the snake in their hands and they just lose their minds because you've pushed that person way over threshold. So when we're dealing with a fearful dog, we have to understand thresholds and we have to apply enough pressure to get them over that threshold. And once they go over that threshold, then they start to learn, oh, look, I didn't die. And that's what happens with dogs on stairs all the times. The dog comes, I put some pressure on them, they come up the stairs, and then I bring them right back down. I bring them back to the stairs. They give me a little bit of resistance. I don't have to give them as much pressure. And usually by the third or fourth time, I don't have to apply any pressure. The dog runs right up the stairs. So this is important when you're dealing with a fearful dog around sound, because sometimes you need to put a little pressure to get the dog to understand we need to continue on and nothing is going to happen to you. You're not going to die. Because again, think about when fear kicks in. When fear kicks in, it's not logical, right? You can't reason with that person with the snake in their hands that's terrified. You can't say, that snake, that's a gardener snake. It's not going to hurt you. It's not poisonous. It's not even going to hurt you if it bites you, right? But to a person that's terrified of snakes, it doesn't matter. Logic explaining to them doesn't matter. So with the dog, we're talking about cross-species communication, which is even harder, right? Because you can't say, listen, those stairs aren't going to kill you. Those fireworks of half a mile away are not going to kill you. So this is where we have to apply a little bit of pressure and get them up through those thresholds. The other reason obedience and pressure is important is because teaching the dog a command like place, it's one of the commands that we teach. We teach the dogs they have to go over and they have to get on their bed. They can't come off of the bed until we give them permission. So the dog learns to stay on the bed and they can't come off. If they come off, right, we can put pressure on them to get back on. So once we teach place, then what we can do is we can start to do low-level exposure. And this is what I recommend to a lot of people. So you can start low-level exposure today with your dog. Let's say you're going to leave the house for, I don't know, half hour. Say tomorrow you're going to leave for about half hour. Put your dog in the crate or in the room. I would recommend a crate if you have it. And you go to YouTube, you find some fireworks, and you have the speakers hooked up, and you turn on the fireworks at just a low level. You don't want to go over threshold. Again, thresholds with your dog, right? You'd have them playing in the background. So your dog hears them. You put it up high enough where the dog hears them, but not so high that the dog starts freaking out. Just high enough so that they hear the fireworks, and then there's a loop that plays for an hour, and you just let that play in the background while you leave the house. Dog's just in the crate. Again, not so loud that the dog is panicking, just loud enough where it's just below threshold, right about here. Not here, right about here. And the dog just constantly hears it. And you start doing this day after day after day. And what's going to happen is that threshold is going to start getting higher and higher. And you can start turning up the volume louder and louder. Okay. So you start doing that. That's one way that you start to expose the dog consistently day after day. Then once your dog learns place really well, they learn that they can't come off. So what we do is we put them on place, and if they're on the bed, they know they can't come off, we start to expose them to sound. So they're on the bed, they want to get off, but they know they can't because there's a consequence for coming off the bed. And so it helps the dog learn to work through whatever it is that's kind of making them nervous. Because again, we have to put them in situations. We can't say to the dog, hey, there's nothing really to worry about here. We have to put enough pressure on them, and we have to work them around thresholds. We have to expose them so that they start to learn, I'm not going to die. Okay. So that's where obedience training can really be helpful. Once you learn how to apply pressure, once you start teaching your dog some things like place, once you start doing low-level exposure to different sounds, you can do, YouTube has everything, fireworks, cars backfiring, gunshots, right? Constant exposure on very, very low levels. All right. But you really have to understand, as I said, you have to understand how negative reinforcement works, how to apply pressure. Pressure and negative reinforcement are the same thing, but you have to understand, because if you're going to help the dog through these fearful situations, food is not going to work. It's not going to work because the dog doesn't want to eat when they're scared. Okay, agility training. We like to do a lot of agility training with fearful dogs. A lot of times we have dogs that come in, we want to do some just obedience training with them. But again, they're so nervous, they don't take treats, they don't respond to praise, they don't want a toy. So you have a dog that comes in for 5-week training program that just sits there in the corner. And the owner's sitting there going, well, there's 5 weeks of training that we really didn't accomplish much. So a lot of times if we have a fearful dog, what we do is we start doing some agility training. We start having them go over jumps. We have them go up to the 8 frame. We have them go across the walks. And what you'll see is you see the dog's confidence level start to go up. And as the dog's confidence level goes up, they start to relax. And as they start to relax, they start taking food. Once they start taking food, now we can start doing all kinds of fun stuff. The other thing that we can do is as they're doing the agility training, we can start to expose them to sound in the background. So the dog's jumping over this jump right here. And in the background, we got stuff going on. We got loud noises going, not super loud, again, within the dog's threshold. But now the dog goes from jump, just a little bit of sound. What was that? But then they go on to the next jump, some more sound, next jump. And pretty soon, because their focus is on doing this fun agility stuff, the sounds don't have that much influence on their behavior anymore. And pretty soon they learn, hey, look, I'm doing this fun stuff with all that crazy sound going on in the background. And again, I'm still here. Nothing bad, terrible happened to me. So agility training really helps build up the dog's confidence. And then, okay, now, to finish up here, this is what I call the nuclear option. Sometimes I have one of these crates. It's called a high impact crate. They're not cheap, but when you have a really fearful dog, sometimes you need a high impact crate like this, where the dog can't escape. And the dog really can't injure themselves. I mean, they could still dig and they still can, but not like a normal crate. And these high impact crates are incredibly well made. They're not cheap. This one that I have is about $1,100, but when it's a super fearful dog and drugs aren't working, a lot of these things aren't working, you have to keep the dog safe. You have to keep them safe, because a lot of dogs will bust out of any crate. They'll bust through windows. And when you have that dog with that level and that intensity of fear, this is what you need. And then with this type of crate, you have to start that low level exposure in the background, helping the dog hear things, again, without freaking them out completely, but hear things to the point where they start to develop their tolerance. And that's really what it is. I had a little shelter years ago that was nervous around sound, and I just did a lot of exposure, and I didn't reinforce the emotions or the fear. And she really, within 6 months, overcame all her problems around sound. She's a very stable dog. But high impact crates are something to look into if you have that type of dog that's could possibly kill themselves if they get free. So as I said at the beginning, to wrap this up, there's not one technique to help a fearful dog. It takes multiple action steps. There's 2 ways to help a fearful dog. One is to control the environment, like we talked about, safe space, noise canceling curtains, headphones, and then the second is to help the dog overcome the fear. Steps to control the environment: create a safe space, safe area, noise canceling headset, exercise early, use calming remedies, thunder shirt, anxiety wraps, drugs, high impact crates if you really need it. Steps to help the dog overcome fear: low level exposure. Okay, sounds in the background constantly. Don't reinforce the fear or the emotions. Learn how to use negative reinforcement. You know, if you don't live in this section of the world, find a trainer that understands positive and negative reinforcement. One is not good and one is not bad. They're both reinforcement. They're both information. Everybody asks me, should I use positive reinforcement or should I use negative reinforcement? And my answer is always use both. Combination of the two is how you get good obedience. Combination of the two is how you help dogs overcome fear. Combination of the two is how you train a dog, not just positive reinforcement. You need to use both, okay? Along with the obedience training and some agility training. So I hope this was useful to you. Feel free to send me off an email if you have any questions. If you're anywhere around Westport, Massachusetts, and you need some training, feel free to stop in. And if you enjoyed this or any of my emails or any of my videos, if I've ever helped you out with dog training, if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it if you could vote for us the best of the best 2021. We'd really appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Thanks a lot for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate it. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.